Alright, what we're going to do today is learn how to input yourself, the picture that you guys took yesterday, into a background of your choice. So I have prepared a little something for you guys to kind of walk you through what we're going to be doing. So first thing you want to do is open up the file, the picture of you that we took yesterday. I just grabbed one from the internet of a very illustrious actor, and then open up a background that you want to put yourself into. So what I've chosen to do is take a cast of the Avengers movie and try to see if I can add Mr. Bean in a somewhat realistic and convincing way. First step that we're going to do is you guys are going to cut yourself out of the photo. So you guys have done green screen shots against a green screen, and the purpose of that is so that it makes it really easy to remove yourself from that shot and put yourself into another one. The tool that you're going to look for is the magic wand tool on this side. And down here you'll see when you get this tool there's some different things like brush size. I think normal brush size is around 15, 10 or 15. It just makes it larger or smaller, but it generally does the same thing. And what we do with this tool is you're going to look for the, in this case, the white space, and your screen the green space, and we're going to select. And what it should do is it should kind of automatically select an area that we want. Now I'm going to get into some problem with these fingers over here. You'll see that it cut off some of Mr. Bean's hands, and for realism that's not really going to work for me. So I'm going to press the Control plus button, so the Control key, hold it down and press the plus key, and it's going to zoom in for me. So I can do this a couple times. Now I want to make sure that his fingers are added or subtracted well, so I'm going to make the brush smaller now that I've zoomed in, and I'm going to really make sure that, oh, now I've just removed his hand. So on your keypad you can hold the Alt and Control key. On the Mac it's a little different. Let me see which one it is here. Not this one, add. On the Mac it's a Option key. It's the Control key, I believe, and the Alt key that allow you to kind of re-add to your selection. So I'm going to be very careful. Try to get Mr. Bean's hands back in here. I'm holding down a key right now in order to re-add to the selection to make sure I get this. I'm going to let go of the key, and I want to make sure that I select between his fingers there. And now his hands are cut out nicely. Everything else looks pretty good. You can see this isn't the best quality photo that I've found, but it was one that kind of suited the stance that I wanted. So I'm going to press Control and negative to zoom back out to where I want. And I'm pretty happy with this. I'm just going to do one quick modification just to make it a little neater. I'm going to click Select and Refine Edge, and I'm just going to feather my edge just a little bit and smooth my edge just a little bit as well. This is going to make the selection a little nicer. It's going to smooth it down for me a little bit so the edge doesn't look so jagged. Okay, now what you'll realize though is what we've actually selected is we've selected all of the white space. Okay, we haven't actually selected Mr. Bean at all. We've selected all the white space, or in your case we've selected green space. So I have to click the select button and inverse, and what that should do is it should now just select Mr. Bean. Just him, and none of the white space is selected. When you do that, before you click anywhere else or do anything else, make sure you just click Edit and Copy, or Control C, in order to make sure that you've copied your character that you want. Alright, we're going to move on to the next step. We're going to go to the scene that we want to insert ourselves into. And the first thing that we're going to do in this scene is we are going to duplicate a layer. So background copy. So we have two copies of our background. The reason that we're going to do this is it allows us to insert us into the photo in front of some objects and behind some other ones, so it looks like we're actually there, not just kind of propped up in front. Now this is kind of my method of doing it. I'm by no means a Photoshop expert, but I find this works. If you guys have another method, or you know another method that works, excellent. So now that we're all ready, I'm going to edit and I'm going to paste Mr. Bean in this photo. And right now he's kind of totally out of proportion. He's not the right size, and he's not exactly where I want him. So I'm going to shrink him down so he looks about the right size. I think about there. I'm trying to match up his head with, I forget this actor's name there. I'm going to put him over there, and maybe I'll kind of turn him a little bit so he looks kind of off kilter. He's going to be right about here. And I'm going to move this a little bit higher up and a little bit further over. Okay. So obviously this is looks like a really terrible Photoshop job. There is no sense of realism here. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to grab this layer that he's located in. Remember, if you don't have this option, make sure you're an expert. Make sure you see the layers button selected down here. And I'm going to grab his layer, click, and pull down in between the two layers, and he's going to disappear. And what's actually happened is we have two duplicate layers. We have two duplicate background layers, and if I hide the first one, we'll see him there again. But what we are going to do is we are going to select the background, the top layer of the background, the top duplicate layer, and we're going to select our eraser function. And what we're going to do is we're going to erase where we want him to show up behind. Okay, if you want something to remain in front of your Photoshop, you have to erase very carefully around them. So I want Mark Ruffalo here. I want him to be in the foreground. I want him to be in front of Mr. Bean. So I have to be very careful. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. I'm going to move over to Mark Ruffalo, and I'm going to, I have my eraser tool. I can change its size here. I'm going to very carefully begin to erase the very top background layer around Mark Ruffalo. And what you'll see is Mr. Bean will start appearing in the background because we're removing the layer that's on top of Mr. Bean so that we can show him in the background. Okay, now if you don't do this carefully, it's going to look kind of jagged, and mine is already looking like that a little bit. Anyway, I'm not going to be too careful here. I'm just showing you guys what I'm doing. Oh. So make sure you have the right layer selected on your background layer as we go throughout. So you can see I erased a little bit of Mr. Bean there. I'm going to make sure I undo that erase. If I want to see, there, he's still there. He's all good. Okay, so let's do this one last time. Shoot. Okay. Make sure, like I have constantly not been doing, that you have the background layer selected. You're erasing from this layer, but you don't want to erase from this one. Just going to double check, make sure this one's okay. It is. Go back to this one, and now we can do our erasing, and everything should be fine. So I'm not going to be too careful. I want you guys to really make sure you zoom in closer. Make sure you get a really nice, neat erase. Okay. Now I want him to be in front of this actor here, so I don't mind erasing this guy because I'm just erasing the background layer that he's in, that Mr. Bean's going to be in front of here. But I got to be careful with what I want in front of the person that I'm inputting. I have to be careful with what I erase. Okay, so now that I've kind of done the careful work, I can make this a bit bigger, and I can reveal my character in behind here. Zoom out. Oops. No, I don't want this. Okay. So I've got Mr. Bean in there, and I've decided that he looks a little bit weird. So I'm going to make him a little smaller, and I'm going to push him a little lower. And I'm going to make sure that I go back to this layer after I select, and I'm going to just tidy up this erasing a little bit more. Okay, so to me that looks pretty good. Now, the first thing that you guys will notice if you look at this picture is that the lighting is way off, right? These guys in the picture are you know, fairly dark under studio lighting, and Mr. Bean is really washed out and he's really bright here. So what we can do is there's some Photoshop options that we're just going to play around with a little bit. You can play around with them as much as you'd like, but we're going to make sure we have the layer selected. We're going to go into an enhance and adjust lighting. And we're going to go into brightness and contrast. So right now, the first thing that pops out, he's a bit too bright. So we're going to just darken him up a little bit. So it looks a little bit more realistic. And we can play around with contrast too. All right, obviously don't wash it way out or go the other way, or it looks like a bit of a ghost. I'm going to just find somewhere in between. Okay, so that's a little better. Finally, if you look at the photo here, you'll see that Mark Ruffalo is casting a shadow here, and these guys not so much, but certainly we see a shadow here, yet Mr. Bean doesn't cast a shadow at all. So either he's a vampire or we need to do something to our Photoshop to finish this up. So let's go to one last thing that we're going to do. We're going to have a select layer. We're going to go to layer style and style settings, and the whole time we have our layer selected that has our cutout. And what we're going to select is a drop shadow. We want to add a drop shadow. Now this is a really cool setting. We can change the size of the shadow that we add. We can change the distance of the shadow that we add. And I'm going to try to get it so you guys can see where this is. I'm going to make it a fairly small shadow. And now you can see it coming in around here. And you can see if I change the angle, the shadow moves. And I can change how far away from him it is, how far his shadow he casts. And we don't want him to cast too much of a shadow. We want to kind of compare it to something down here so it's really similar. I think that lighting angle is pretty good. Maybe just a little lower like that. Distance is good. Opacity makes it either really light or really dark. We want it somewhere in the middle here. Okay. So we've added a shadow. We've changed his color a little bit. If I were to zoom out a little bit, I mean, yeah, it still looks like a fake, but it's a pretty good fake, right? So you guys making sure that you've cut yourselves out nicely, you've pasted yourself in a photo in front of something and behind something else. You've adjusted the lighting and you've added a bit of a drop shadow, and that is your task for today's class.